I think, Molly, we have some more questions that have cropped up.
We do, actually. So one of them is, I think two of them are related, but we'll start with the first one. And that is, how can you monetize your intellectual property? And is now a good time to do it?
So the ways that, the standard ways that you monetize your intellectual property, there's several standard ways of doing that. The most obvious, of course, is that you have an invention or you have a startup company that's developing an invention or has fully developed an invention, and you're acquired by big pharma or by big medical device, something like that. As Molly pointed out, your intellectual property portfolio protection is the biggest asset of your startup company, for example. So if you're acquired by, let's say, big pharma, as an example, that's what big pharma is purchasing. I mean, they don't want your old glassware and your old cell culture plasticware, or old electronic supplies that you've had sitting around in your workspace in your laboratory. They are buying your intellectual property. If you don't have any intellectual property, they have nothing to acquire, and they won't acquire you, basically. So obviously, if they're purchasing you, your company, your invention, and they're buying your intellectual property, that's monetizing your IP, right? You've just sold your whole portfolio. So there's other ways. You may, over the course of forming a startup company, accumulate a patent portfolio, and as you develop your product or products, you may find that some things that you thought were quite important when you started turn out to be maybe not so important. That particular piece of medical device, or maybe some drug, turns out to be unfavorable for some reason. It's not stable. It can't be easily produced for some reason, and so you move on to other things which are related. But you may have accumulated patent protection for something, and that's not your primary product, and you're not that interested in. But that IP may still have value to somebody else that wants to work on that in some aspect. And so, for something like that, you can look at that as an asset, and there's several things you can do with that to monetize that particular asset. You can just sell that particular patent, for example, if it covers, like I said, a drug which did not turn out to be your lead compound, as it were. So that's done through something called an assignment, which is basically a sale of your patent rights, basically, to somebody else. And that would be a way to monetize your IP. There's also a more common way, I guess, for existing intellectual property rights that you have, is you may want to license those to somebody else. And so there's ways that you can do that you may have the ability to split out certain patent rights that you're not interested pursuing. It's referred to as a field license. But for example, maybe you're really interested in working on lung cancer, but some aspect of the therapy or treatment or drug or device that you have invented may have efficacy for something like prostate cancer, and it's not a big focus of yours. And someone comes along that says, it is a focus of mine. I want to work on prostate cancer, and it looks like you've got something that might be therapeutically effective here, but you've got patent rights which are broad enough to protect that area as well. You can license to that individual the rights to pursue those sorts of therapies with respect to prostate cancer alone, while maintaining, the rights for lung cancer and other forms of cancer you're interested in for yourself. So you can monetize, a portion of it or an aspect of your intellectual property in that way through licensing agreements, basically. I think those are the two main ways that you would do it. And I guess you asked, is now a particularly good time? Well, now, in the medical space, now obviously makes reference to, the COVID-19 pandemic. And I guess if you have some form of intellectual property or some invention which would be particularly useful for a treatment or diagnosis or some aspect of responding to the COVID-19 pandemic, and you haven't developed really deep resources, that is a lot of capital, to pursue that and get it into the clinic quickly, then maybe partnering with, big pharma, big medical device, somebody who's got those resources and can move it quickly at this time, might be helpful. It might be a good time to monetize that. I guess if you have an invention related to brain cancer or something, I'm not sure that now would be any better time to monetize that than later. You would have to look at the market, I guess. If it's not related to COVID-19, I don't know why now would be any better than any other time. It wouldn't be a bad time if you're at that point where you've got, an approved therapy and you're getting down the road towards FDA approval. But there's nothing special about this time for something that's not COVID-19 related that I would think would be spurring you to try and monetize right now.
Yeah. And Rob, so I'll just ask you, this is my own personal question, but how about patent pools? So on the tech side of the world, patent pools are a pretty common thing, especially when you're talking about developing a, kind of a standard way of either connecting or other types of standards. Oftentimes a patent pool will form. I don't know how common that is in the medical device world or anything like that, but I do know that there are some patent pools that are forming as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. Is that a common thing, or is that just, I think, as a result of the current unprecedented situation we find ourselves in?
Yeah, the answer to that is no. It's not common with medical patents very much, and I know I've seen it two areas. Obviously, there's been a push for that around COVID-19 related inventions, basically, as well as CRISPR. There was a patent pool formed around CRISPR. Some of the companies that have pushed further in the CRISPR space, for example, have pushed back against the patent pool. Those companies that have spent a lot of money and developed CRISPR into therapeutics have not been thrilled about joining the patent pool, basically. And you've seen some pushback, I've seen some pushback, I guess, about the idea of a patent pool for the COVID-19 related therapeutics. Instead, I guess what you've seen, for example, Gilead with remdesivir has done a lot of licensing agreements that have allowed production of this basically for free in different countries around the world. There's some other areas, that they have been willing to get those sorts of drugs and treatments out, but they're not using the patent pool as a mechanism of doing that. So it really hasn't been very popular. That approach has not been very popular in the medical space.